What's up, beer seekers? Brandon and Nick here. In the spirit of Massachusetts Beer Week coming up, we've got part 2 of our series with some of the state's best beer influencers and media personalities. And tonight we are joined by the Goliath of the Massachusetts craft beer scene. Bob from Mass Brew Bros is here. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to chat tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you guys decided to have me on, and really excited to talk about Massachusetts craft beer because it's what we do. We're right in the name, so Mass Brew Bros, and do the best we can to kind of shine a light on everything that's going on in Mass beer, the breweries, the beers, the events, whatever we can. So thank you.
Well, we've got no one better to talk about that with tonight. And we obviously have a lot to cover. So what we want to do is we want to start with how you got into the Mass beer scene and how Mass Brew Bros got started.
So kind of the quick version is that, when I grew up in the 80s, it wasn't craft beers per se, and Sam and Harpoon were around. But probably about maybe 15 years ago, we started to notice there was these craft beer events to go to, beer fest, like Beer Advocate, the beer summits. So we started going to those and really kind of craft beer is different. Let's get in, let's do that. But probably the real genesis is when Massachusetts changed their laws, and they said you could actually drink at the breweries. That was probably about 8 years ago or so. And we created some social media around that when we started to travel to breweries and go and visit breweries. And it was really exciting thing. Like we are in some random town in Massachusetts drinking at a brewery. And this is incredible. And we started posting about it, and people started following us, wanted to know. And then as we went along, we realized that there wasn't enough information learning about all these breweries and what you could do and where you could go. So we decided to create our own website. We did that probably it'll be 5 years ago with the website, massbrewbros.com. This April will be 5 years. And we put that together just to help people find what we found was so amazing, which was, so many amazing people making beer, really great beer. The taproom culture was just fantastic. So that's what really sent us on our path. And, it's been just several years of learning about beer and meeting new people.
Yeah, you really carved a niche into that space. I mean, like you said, there was a need for it, especially with all these craft breweries popping up, and nowadays too, it's just, it seems like it's never ending. There's new craft beer news all the time. So, today, like what's kind of a day-to-day for you in the Mass beer scene?
Well, it's, constantly keeping up on social media. I mean, just to see, beer releases, what's going on, keeping on top of that, to try and make sure that we're keeping ahead of. I mean, we try and pride ourselves being in the know what's going on, especially new breweries popping up. We're constantly checking those things. So it's just trying to, I guess most of the day is just research and trying to find information so we can get it out to our followers so they can be on top of what we know as quickly as we can find it. So it's going through that stuff. And then, then it's trying to get to breweries too. I guess one of the big things we try to set ourselves apart from others is that we really want to have a first-person relationship with these breweries. So we've actually been to every single Massachusetts brewery in the state, actually within the last year as well. So we really try and get to know the people who making the beer, the people who frequent the place and know what the place is like. So when we talk about, the beers, the brewery, you have firsthand knowledge of what it's about and really kind of paint a good picture for people in that regard. So.
Yeah, and I know, like you said, you definitely travel to the breweries. Do you know how many you probably went to last year?
Well, I actually did a little contest on social media. I asked people to guess how many brewery visits I made in 2020 in light of the pandemic as well. And so people guessed all over the place. Some people guessed like 60 breweries. Someone guessed like 500. Actually, the winning guess was 300 because I actually went to 299 different brewery visits. So that was some breweries more than once. There was obviously a few out of state, but 299 individual brewery visits during 2020. A lot of that was tough because it was mostly, I would say the first half, a lot was just beer to go, just trying to check in and get some beer to go and just talk to the brewers or whoever there I could talk to, socially distant with masks on and whatever, but just to check in and see how they were doing, just try to get out there. But it's a lot of my time spent going to breweries. I mean, I enjoy it, don't get me wrong. I can't certainly not complain about that. My car might not like it so much for the miles I've racked up on it, but that's the important thing to me. I think of all the things I do is going to breweries, which is why this last year has been tough. Going to the breweries is what I love the most. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important for you to do that. I mean, that is quite literally your job, and that's the definition of what you're trying to do, is to maintain these contacts. It's your job to to show up and be like that, the face to connect people to the Massachusetts beer scene. Kind of like you're like the Adam Schefter, I guess, of the Massachusetts beer world. You're supposed to stay on top of all the stuff and be like the go-to source. I mean, so yeah, I guess it makes sense that that's your thing, is trying to get to as many breweries as possible. And obviously this past year was a really difficult one in terms of the Massachusetts beer scene and beer scene all across the country, right?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. I mean, you know, obviously beyond breweries, I mean, just, you know, just people in general, just, you know, the fact that you're cooped up and the mental health side of it, you know, there was definitely a point where I was, you know, was feeling down, like you just cooped up and you just, you know, no one's living a life that they want to. As far as the breweries go, because, you know, maybe with the exception of a few breweries in Massachusetts, most of them are quite frankly just small businesses. I mean, you know, you have your Sam's and Harpoons of the world, but they're small businesses there, and they're really dependent on tap room, you know, and they're dependent on people coming there and spending money there. And so when you had to close them down and you couldn't be there, or even some of the, you know, the phases where you had to restrict, I think like this week actually opened to 50%, even 50%, it's extremely difficult, you know, for a brewery to operate that. And, you know, most breweries have fought through, pivoted many, many times, you know, to start canning beer, getting beer out there, you know, they had to do the restriction in terms of getting, you know, serving food. So a lot of them work real hard to keep themselves afloat. I'm just hoping that with the better weather coming soon, you know, the vaccines coming out, that all these breweries that have fought real hard for last year to stay alive are going to be able to get through this. So, but we'll see. It's still not out of the woods yet. So,
right.
Yeah. And do you see now, given everything that's happened over the last year, I know we talk about it a lot, all the changes that breweries had to make, whether it's to-go beers, we've seen delivery. Do you think there's certain trends that you see now that are here to stay because of what's happened over the last year?
yeah, I mean, I think like any good business, you have to make sure that you're ready for anything, because you honestly never know what the future's going to hold. You know, if you financially, you know, obviously this virus, whatever pops up, you got to be ready to transition yourselves. And I think, you know, again, the idea that you just couldn't be tap room heavy, also breweries that were draft heavy,
Yeah.
you know, the bigger breweries that have, you know, well, 50% of their stock in draft, that was a hard thing too. You just have to find a better way to be balanced in that. And so some of the things I think that probably will continue, which I think people appreciate, was the online ordering. I think that was made a lot easy, you know, not to say that, you know, it wasn't a badge of honor way back in the day, standing in line at some of these breweries waiting for beer. That's a pretty cool thing to do, you know, the very social aspect of it and all that stuff. But the convenience of just being able to order online, knowing what you want, and know that I could just show up and ready to grab it. You know, I think the online ordering is probably here to stay. Also, like, you know, like maybe reservations too, knowing that you can maybe have a seat if you're going to go there. A lot of breweries open up reservations, so you knew that you had a seat and you weren't worried about being turned away or standing in line for that as well. And then also, yeah, delivery. I think delivery is probably going to be, I hope, because I mean, some breweries might not get back to that if you're a small brewery, but some of the bigger breweries, you know, like Trillium delivering, you know, whether it's their own delivery system, or UPS, or you know, through companies like Drizzly and those other ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think delivery, you know, unless the government decides to change things. I mean, I never would have thought in my lifetime, you know, you get beer delivered to your door. I think that's a pretty cool thing. So hopefully that will continue. I think those are some of the positive trends that'll come out of this.
Yeah, you mentioned too, Massachusetts having to serve food at all of these places that serve alcohol, and a few places. One that sticks out off the top of my head, obviously local for me, East Regiment Beer Company in Salem, Massachusetts, they opened up their own kitchen, and now they're selling food, which is what they weren't doing previously. So a lot of these places like that have had to pivot in that way too. And now, you know, going forward, they have a full kitchen, and I'm sure that's probably not the only place in Massachusetts that's done something like that.
Well, I think Jim Cook of Sam Adams famously said, "I have no interest in being in the food game." And back when he started, either you had a brew pub or you had distribution. There was no tap rooms back then. Right. So he said, "I'm just going to distribute." I think he might have opened a brew pub quickly, but just like, this is not what I want to do. I want to brew beer. I don't want to be involved in food. And the food is, again, you can be, you know, I'm excited to be a brewer and present beer to you, is what a lot of these brewers say. And they're like, I have no interest in getting the food. It's a whole nother level, a whole nother set of licensing and issues and stuff that they just didn't want to get involved in. And, you know, for years, it worked out pretty well to have partner with someone else, like a food truck or something like that, to have food online, or people are happy to just kind of get the beer, I want a beer or two and then move on for dinner, or come there after dinner, for a beer or two, and that seemed to work out well. But right, they've all had to kind of figure out their way to create a food system at their place. And probably in the long run, it probably makes sense for all these breweries to do at this point.
Yeah.
It's just a different scene than it was years ago. I mean, you could really just roll up to a brewery and people are excited. Hey, I'm just going to try a beer, and food wasn't really on your mind. But I think it's such a crowded market right now, and there's so many breweries out there that you're really reaching mainstream people. So they're kind of expecting, when I go out, I probably want to eat food. So, and so if you have like a legitimate kitchen and a food menu there, I think that makes sense for you if you can find a way to pull that off. I know it's not always an easy thing. It's a new layer, but I think that's probably a best way to go about it right now. If you're a new brewery opening, if you can do that.
Yeah. And you mentioned how really crowded the brew scene, especially in Massachusetts, has become, and you got to grow up in it, which had to be pretty cool to see all these breweries open up through the years. Do you think that's a trend that's going to continue, specifically really here in Mass, or are we going to hit a limit where it's like, all right, we might have too many breweries at some point?
Well, I mean, there were legit bubbles. There was bubbles in the 90s. There was, bubble in the early 2000s. And actually, quite frankly, the first blog we wrote on our website was, will there be a craft beer bubble? And that's 5 years ago. So, and when we first started, there was only about maybe 30 or 40 breweries you could visit. Now there's 175. So
that's unbelievable.
I just think I think we're still going to get more breweries. I mean, even in the pandemic where we did have 12 breweries closed this year, we did have 27 that opened.
Yeah.
In light of the pandemic. And, and I'm actually trying to work on, that's one of the things we do too, is constant research to see new breweries are going to open. And I have a line on, I don't know, another 50 or more that are in plans. I mean, again, when or how it all comes to fruition for them,
sure,
we'll see. But yeah, the breweries, I'm probably at the point where we may be able to continue to add breweries, but we're probably going to see more breweries closing. Because before it used to be like, it was very rare that a brewery closed. That'd be something here or there, but it's almost like, we may be reaching the saturation point pretty soon where if you add a brewery, you lose a brewery. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we've been talking about a bubble for years now.
Yeah.
It keeps growing. I mean, and obviously, the COVID, probably may have an effect on breweries opening and closing. But again, you never say never. I think probably the underlying effect, the underlying thing from craft brewers is that they're very resilient. They really want to have their own business. They want to be self-run. They want to do this. So they're going to fight really hard to open and fight really hard to stay open. So
if there's one thing that we've learned over the past year plus of doing this BeerSighted adventure, it's exactly that about the craft beer industry, and especially in Massachusetts, is that everyone is resilient. Everyone it's such a great community, and everyone supports each other. And, we love to see businesses thrive like that, and we love to support those businesses as well. And, you mentioned some of the breweries that closed and then a bunch more opened. And that was one thing that we wanted to ask you about. And since we mentioned already that there's no one more connected to the craft brew scene than you, what is kind of the state of Massachusetts craft beer right now? Is it, you obviously said there's 27, I think, that opened this past year. It's been a tough year because of the pandemic. Where do we sit right now in terms of Massachusetts beer and how it's thriving?
Well, I mean, I think it's, again, it's really hard to know this year. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, I'd probably have a better handle on exactly where we are, because COVID is just a thing that I don't think anyone really has a full grasp on a lot of this stuff. I mean, we're experts talking all the time, but it's just hard to know. But I mean, like I said, I think breweries were still going to open, and it's probably this is what the case is. If breweries close, I mean, again, you even look like the restaurant industry, which was hit a lot harder than the breweries. A lot of restaurants closed, but restaurants will open again because people want to go to restaurants. There's always going to be need for restaurants. It's been, one closed, one opens. That's what it is, and I feel like that's going to be with the breweries too. Now who's going to continue to go on? I'm not sure. I mean, obviously there's some breweries that are in it longer, and I think what it comes down to for any business is what is your business model? What is your financial situation? If you're in a case where, you're maybe you own your property, you're not paying the landlord, your rent's low, you know, you've got the right, you know, in terms of distribution model, in terms of getting beer out there, you know, and you're trying to balance all those things. If you got all the right answers for that in any small business, then you're probably going to continue to go for a while. But then, you know, and something actually we talked about a while ago is like, we're actually starting to get to the point where some of these breweries are getting to be in the 10, 15 year range. Like, where do they go from here? Like, are these breweries legacy breweries? Do they get passed on to their progeny, meaning their kids? Do they get bought out by someone else? Where do these breweries go? So, I mean, a lot of these breweries are getting to the point where, you know, it's no longer new and we're trying this out. They're like, all right, how do we extend this business? How do we keep this going, you know, for many years from now? I mean, are they going to be the Sam Adams and Harpoons that are around for 30 something years and continue to grow? And I think the potential for a number of them to do that, but it all comes down to, again, your financial decisions and, you know, the drive of each brewery. But I think we're, you know, I think we'll see, I guess, is my answer. We'll see.
Yeah, it's kind of the thought for everybody these days.
Now that Mass Beer Week is coming up, I know you guys have a few pretty big things planned. Obviously, it's not going to be the same as previous years, but what are your big events coming up for Mass Beer Week?
Well, you know, unlike the last few years when we've been able to do a lot of in-person events, like you actually go there, like last year, our big event for the week was our Blind Beer Fest, which is a 350-person beer festival where people tasted beers blindly and then voted for their favorites. And a lot of breweries hosted in-person events. So a lot of the things this year will be online. A lot of breweries did beer releases. So that's kind of what you're looking for this week is to join online, kind of like you've been doing all year. You know, maybe you're zoomed out, but, you know, there's going to be a lot of great events this week. You know, the freshman class, which has been a really great event for the last several years, where you talk about new breweries. These breweries are a year or younger, and so they're going to be online, and they'll have a local beer personality. We're actually hosting one with 4-Star Beer, which opened up in Northfield, and there's going to be one each night next week, where you get to, if you order the beer ahead of time, get to taste along with the brewers to talk about their brewery, you know, what it's like there, give you a little tour, behind the scenes talk while you taste their beers. So you can look for that. Again, a lot of beer releases. I'm actually trying to put together a blog for this week, Wednesday or Thursday. Plus, you can, all these events you want to find, if you go to the Mass Beer Week Facebook page, we keep compiling events there. Or again, most of them, like I said, are virtual tasting along and that type of thing, but you can see when they are and how to get involved and where you can be for those things. So that's kind of what's going on with that right this week. But yeah, I think I'm excited for some of the beer releases because there's a number of collabs going on where breweries are, you know, reached out to each other, which is what we really want a Mass Beer Week to be, is very collaborative and bring the state together, you know, not only breweries together, but the people together and just really celebrate mass beer. And I think, you know, collabs really do something like that. So.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of collabs, we know you have a pretty big one coming out on the 10th yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how it came to be?
Yeah, well, that's one thing we've been, again, fortunately, you know, by making a lot of relationships with these breweries over the years, we've been able to have a couple of beer collabs and talk to breweries. We, you know, Rob and I have come up with some different ideas for beers. Like one we had was, you know, well, let's do a pretzel beer. Why can't we do a pretzel beer? So we reached out to Dorchester Brewing and we partnered up with Wicked Twisted Pretzels and created Brew Bros Wicked Twisted Dunkel. And it was a Dunkel lager with 40 pounds of soft pretzels and a little pinch of salt in it. And we released it on National Pretzel Day. So we did that a couple of times. And then last year we partnered with Wachusett Brewing and did an Imperial Red Ale with spruce tips and called it Brew Bros Wear Plaid. And we had a little plaid party. So it's been really fortunate to build these relationships. So for this year, I just happened to be talking to Ray Berry, who works at White Line, and I reached out to him about, you know, hey, what about doing actually real genesis is because my drinking name is Big Pride, and they were White Line and obviously Line and Pride. So I said, hey, we could do something with that. So I reached out with him that, and he said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then he just said, let's bring some more breweries in. So he reached out to 2 Weeks Notice, who's in West Springfield. So kind of made a Springfield collaboration. So we got to talking, and we had someone mentioned oat milk and how that's become a thing right now. So we decided to do a milkshake IPA. So instead of using, you know, lactose, because some people lactose, intolerant. So there's going to be a lactose-free milkshake IPA. We decided to add cereal to it, oat cereal, fruit cereal. So it's going to be like a breakfast cereal beer. It's called Seriously Fruity. And so it's just, you know, it's a fun beer, you know, and it's just something to experiment. And it was really great to be part of the creative and collaborative process of making a beer, you know, sitting down from beginning to end to talk about how we're going to put this beer together, to brewing it, you know, a couple weeks ago. And then the release, will be next week. We're going to do it in cans from White Lion and in distribution on Wednesday at the 10th. And then we're going to have a little, it'll be on tap for a little party. That will be an in-person party at 2 weeks notice on the 13th.
Cool.
We're actually talking about maybe kicking it off at 10 a.m. since it's a breakfast beer. So
there you go.
But yeah,
That's
so
a
it's
good
been
strategy,
amazing.
I like
It's
that.
really cool to do things like this. I mean, what we do has really led to a lot of pretty cool craft beer opportunities.
What kind of distribution do you think you're going to get on that? And do you think it's going to be like maybe something that could be recurring, or do you envision this just being like 2021 Mass Beer Week?
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably a one-off, but you never know. I mean, basically when you do something like this, you see what the response is. If people go crazy for it, you know, it's a chance that maybe it gets brewed again. I mean, you know, again, you know, this is a recipe that we just talked about doing, and we'll see how it comes out. But as far as the distribution goes, is that we made a 15-barrel batch of it. So we're going to can, again, there'll be obviously a number of kegs at 2 weeks notice, but the canning is going to be out through White Lion's distribution to their accounts and where their accounts are. And I know they get, you know, around the state, Eastern, Western Mass. So if you check out their website to see where their accounts are, or certainly shoot us a message at Mass Brew Bros. I'm certainly going to find out where it all is, so you can help get your hands on this beer. So, so it should be out and around. I'm excited about that. So, because the last couple ones we did were tap room only. So to get this beer out in the can is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really cool. I love that. You know, we talked obviously a little bit before we started recording about the use of oat milk and putting it into a milkshake IPA to make it lactose free. And that's really a cool play on, you know, nowadays it seems like there's just, everyone's got a little like something kind of like a not a food allergy or just, you know, whatever. You're just trying to like all encompass every beer drinker, and especially, you know, for the people that have lactose intolerance issues. Same thing with this. It's just, it seems like you're really just trying to incorporate.
It can also appeal to, you know, vegans, because, you know, obviously, you know, now it doesn't have, you know, obviously lactose in it. Again, what craft beer lends itself to is experimentation. I mean, not all experimentation works out. Sometimes you make a beer, it's like, but other times, you know, I mean, where would we be right now? What's the most popular style of beer right now, would you say?
IPAs.
What kind of IPAs?
Nick?
I'd say probably like double.
Like, well, yeah, like hazy.
Oh yeah, hazy New England style. Yeah.
Now, IPAs were not that originally, but someone just said, hey, let's heavily oat them. Let's, you know, get them up there and make them hazy and lower the bitterness and make them so fruity, and now double dry hop them. So that all came from experimentation, people trying things. And, you know, and so you never know where the next thing's going to come from. You know, the big push into sours in recent years, or even barrel-aged beers. So you experiment and see, and again, sometimes you hit on something that's really great, and that's the next thing. And so again, but I think it's the thing I like about craft beer is there are near no rules. I mean, there are traditionalists out there that, you know, like their clear beer and like certain things about their beer, and that's all well and good. You know, everyone should drink what they like, but I like that people are willing to experiment and try new things. Again, you only go around this world once. Let's just try it, see what happens, and love the journey, you know?
Yeah, I love that. That is definitely representative of Massachusetts as a whole in the craft beer scene, is that there's just so much for everybody, and you can find anything that you like, including beers made with cereal and oat milk. So that's really cool.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, again, you've got options. I mean, I think if you look at the map of Massachusetts, again, there's a map of every brewery on our website. Everyone lives probably 10, 15 minutes from a brewery right now.
Yeah.
You know, so you can go to a brewery and find a beer and see what it's like. And again, the fact that, you know, there are so many options for beers, and you can find something you'll enjoy. And it's just a great scene right now. I think Massachusetts is leading the way in a lot of that regard too, in terms of the beers they make and reputation and styles. So it's really great to be in Mass right now.
Yep, could not agree more. So we'll wrap this up and we'll get you out of here in a little bit, but, you know, where can people go to not only find information on Mass Beer Week and what you have going on for this upcoming week in general, but just Mass Brew Bros altogether.
Well, again, for Mass Beer Week, you can go to the Mass Beer Week Facebook page, also massbeerweek.org. There's a listing there that in connection with the Mass Brewers Guild. As far as, and also you follow us on any of our channels. Again, I'm trying to list on, we have a calendar of craft beer events. So on massbrewbros.com, you can see events there. Plus, again, we'll put out a couple of blogs around Mass Beer Week. Again, if you just follow us, again, what we try and be is the go-between between brewers and people who love beer. So the breweries come to us to get out information about their breweries, beers, and events, and people come to us to learn about breweries, beers, and events. So again, massbrewbros.com and social media, follow us there. Again, hopefully we're on top of it, and certainly if you've got anything to share, you know, something out there, we always appreciate any tips that people got about beer. Again, we just pride ourselves in trying to keep people as informed as we can about this, great Mass craft beer community.
I love it. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. So there you go, beer seekers, massbrewbros.com. Check them out online and on social media as well at Mass Brew Bros. And we will we'll dive into Mass Beer Week, and we're really looking forward to everything that you have coming up. For us to, follow us on our website, BeerSighted.com. Check us out on YouTube for all of our video content and BeerSighted, and then online on social media at BeerSighted Pod. So Bob, again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. Cheers. Looking forward to Mass Beer
Cheers
Week.
to Mass Beers. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.